Hello, everyone in the Replit community. It's me again, your favorite bald nerd, David. And I'm here today with Replit 101, our coding helpline, where we take time every 2 weeks to go through all of our different forums and all our different avenues and find coding questions that we can try and help with. Please do remember that the point of this live stream is to help new learners or people with genuine questions about how programs work or how to develop software. And if you've got questions, we take priority to the live chat. So if you've got a question and you want to get a head start on everyone else, pop your questions in the chat, and ideally links to REPLs as well, so that we can bring them up and look at them live. Now, this week, there's been a bunch of cool stuff that we've seen. We've seen since last time I saw you the launch of Ghostwriter, which is our AI assistant, which is pretty cool, genuinely pretty cool. I started doing some work when we were in the beta phase with it that I thought would take me about 3 days, and it's like web development work, stuff that I don't do a massive amount of at the moment. So I thought about 3 days. With Ghostwriter turned on, I did it in an afternoon. It is amazing. If you need support with your code, if you need help with your code, our AI assistant, Ghostwriter, is really, really good at suggesting code that you might want to put in, and even finding bugs and problems that you hadn't really thought of, because it suggests good quality code. And also has a brilliant feature called Explain Code, where you can click a button and it'll tell you what that code means in plain English. So you're able to read other people's code and interpret it, even if you know what you're talking about. It is a brilliant feature. So if you've not used that yet, please have a look, give it a go. It is really worth your time of trying to get onto the at least a trial if you can. This is a paid feature, of course. It's 1,000 cycles or $10 a month, but definitely worth it, especially if you learn to program. It takes away a lot of the boring parts that you do time and time again. That is the big news for the last 2 weeks. Let's hope I've got mine turned off before we start trying to solve some people's programming problems this week. And I've got a couple queued up because I can't see in the chat yet tonight. Don't forget, if you do want your question prioritized, especially about the 100 days of code, please do pop it in the live chat. We do prioritize you. Let's pull my screen up and we'll start having a look at some of the questions. And I'm going to go straight to the Discord tonight because I'm saying tonight. You guys know I'm in the UK. I haven't just got a random accent. I'm not doing a voice. It is nighttime for me. But I'm going to check the Discord today because normally I go straight to ask.replit.com and we go through those forums. But I've been overlooking the Discord because there's been some great questions in there. The new features of like the I don't even know what the new feature's called, but it's like a bulletin board type thing. I can tell how old I am, bulletin boards and web. But the the era we've got for code questions is really, really good. You can post questions and get lots of follow-up to it. I picked some from there tonight. I do have a quick question from the live chat. Will there be a free way of getting cycles? I'm sure we'll think of a way that you can earn cycles, not necessarily give them for free, but a way of you can earn, but not at the moment. No, at the moment you have to purchase them for use to buy boosts and stuff like that. But well worth it, I think. Well worth it. Anyway, the question that we were going to deal with first from the Discord was this, and I think this is a really interesting question because people have jumped in to try and help, but I think the key difference is that this question is all about what Replit is for, really. And the question is really, really straightforward. The question is that this person has made a .py quiz on PyCharm. I mean, good luck to you, but maintaining a locally installed IDE is not my idea of a fun time. Made a .py quiz on PyCharm, and I want my class to run the file on their Chromebooks. Is there any way to do that? Use the cough button. There is, and that's pretty much Replit. Replit is one of the only real ways where you can write your code and just send a link to somebody. And people forget this exact feature exists, because that's the thing about Replit that really got me on board many, many years ago when I first started using it in teaching, is that I didn't have to send files anywhere and hope somebody had set up their environment. I really just had to send them a link. I'm going to jump over to Replit now, and we'll just see how you can share executable code with anybody, because it is really, really simple. I'll create for the point of this, a Python file, and I'm going to leave it public. Now, there's another thing that you can use cycles to purchase, the ability to make your REPLs private if you want to. That's quite handy if you want to keep stuff away from people, but I'm going to make this public so you guys can all see it. And I'm going to make a very, very simple quiz here just to simulate what this person has looked at. Oh, another thing we launched in the last 2 weeks is the new sidebar, which I gave you a sneak peek of during the last in the last Replit 101. But let's ask a quiz question. So I'm going to use print to do that, to put the question on there. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to go straight to it. Let's go to answer, input. And I'm going to ask, who is this handsome Baldy? And obviously, put a /n in there, placement type. If answer dot lower equals David, that's me, print correct. Else, I'm going to do a bit of a Britishism, oi cheeky. So I've got a nice simple quiz there that's going to run. And if I put the right answer in, great. If I put the wrong answer in, here we go. Now, back in the old bad PyCharm days, I'd have to download that as a .py file. And, that's what it is. That's what it is sitting in the file system over there, main.py. And I have to send that and hope that the person's got it and just open the text editor. Well, the nice thing about Replit is you can literally take that address there, copy that, and send it to someone, and they will see the cover page for this REPL. They'll be able to click run, and they'll be able to see your code executing straight away. So if you do have code that you want to share with other people and you want them to run it, put it in a REPL and just send them that link and make sure that the REPL is public. Of course, you could publish it to our community if you'd like to get a few more eyeballs on it, especially if it's something really cool and really innovative. And you could also use the multiplayer mode if you want people to look at the code and edit it, but doesn't sound like what this person wants. Chromebooks are ideal for Replit because you have a full IDE on a very lightweight device, actually. But I want to start with that question tonight because I think that a lot of people forget that's one of the beauties of Replit, especially when you've used it for a long time. One of the beauties is you copy the address from your address bar, and anyone in the world, as long as they've got a web browser, can run your code and see the fruits of your labors. Okay. Our second question tonight is from ask.replit.com, which is our forums, where you can go and ask questions about anything to do with Replit. Particularly, we've got a code help section and 100 days of code section there. If you're working with 100 days of code and you want to ask questions or see other questions people have asked, especially as we get towards the things that we are publishing this week, which are things like Replit DB, user interfaces into Kinter on 100 days of code this week, which is a bit 1990s, I know, but you need to know a bit about user interfaces, object orientation, and stuff like that is what's going on this week in 100 days of code. So that stuff does get quite complicated. And anybody that's played around with Tkinter before as graphical user interfaces for Python will tell you it's a bit of hard work working through that. But spoiler alert, the big project there is writing your own visual novel, which is a bit of fun. So it's worth persevering through it to get to that point, I think, anyway. And the demo visual novel I've made for it, it's a bit of fun. Anyway, day 18, which was a guess the number game. One of the issues we often get when people ask questions is they paste the code in. Now, pasting code in means you lose all the formatting. It's there in the wrong kind of font. There's no syntax highlighting. It's very, very hard to debug something like that. It's especially hard to debug this piece of code because we can't see the indents. And as you probably know, in Python, the indents are really important for how that code is going to function. They're part of the structure of the language. So please do make sure that if you're posting questions on the forums, you either use syntax highlighting. I'll just show you down below that some of our regulars have posted it with the syntax highlighting turned on with the code view. And you can see there that you've got indentation and stuff like that to make it look better. Or post a link to the REPL. Make sure it's public and post a link to it. Now, we don't like you posting multiplayer links in the ask.replit.com forums because you may not want us to go and ingest your code, but you can post a normal link to your code. Make sure it's public, just like we looked at previously. It's almost like I linked these two together to get that idea in everyone's head, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Planned ahead, see? Good thinking. But this question in particular is really interesting because it highlights a really, really common thing. And that is when we learn to program in Python, we start putting quotes around everything. And we put quotes around everything because that's what we've done so far. In Python and in many other programming languages, if you're dealing with numbers, and that's integers, whole numbers, or float, real numbers, decimal numbers, then you don't put quotes around those. Now, it does look different when you use syntax highlighting. And let's take Zara's code and let's see if we can get it working and have a look at what we mean. Now, this might feel like a simple thing, but it's very, very common. We've got a while loop there. We've got an if statement here. Let's have a look. I think that's expected to be in there as well. I hope it is anyway. Now, interestingly, neither of these print statements will ever be used because if it gets there, then what's going to happen is the continue is going to send the code right back to the top of the while loop. And that's one of the nice things about the types of constructs we've got in Python. We have continue, we have break, and we can just tell it to go back to the start. Don't worry about running the rest of this code. Just jump back to the start. And that's what continue is doing here. So let's run this code and let's see if we've got it working. Let's have a look. So another issue you have often is that it picks up the wrong kind of quotes if you copy and paste from different kinds of text. And this is a bit of an issue because as you can see here, what I'm actually going to do is just put everything in the pair of quotes to make that a little bit easier. And then you'll see why I'm avoiding these ones here is because numbers shouldn't have quotes around them. If we remove these, we may be in a better place. You can see straight away, as soon as I remove the quotes, the numbers are highlighted in different color. If I quotes around them, they're the same color as the text. Without the quotes, they're a different color to point out that they are numbers and they are different in the ways in which that's working. Great. Let's see if we can get that working. Let's have a look. What have I missed? What have I missed? Oh, I've missed line 1. There we go. There we go. That was an easy thing to fix. There we go. Let's go for number 5. It's not telling us anything, and I think the issue maybe is that we haven't got a number to choose from here yet. But that is at least letting the if statement work. So if I pick a number, say 95, 95, I end up in that top section there too high, and 85 got me down here. So the code is working now because it's got those numbers separated. And those inequality symbols, greater than, less than, or equal than, only really work, and I say this with a pinch of salt, they only really work if you are dealing in numbers. They do work with time, but time is a kind of a number. They do work in some other cases, but really and truly, if you're using greater than, less than, equal to, all that sort of good stuff, you want your numbers to be recognized. And in this case, integers, whole numbers are what we're using to do that. And thankfully, and this is why you should get on the forums if you've got coding questions, this one was actually answered by one of our regulars, by Matt Destroyer, who not only solved the problem, but explained it really nice. So Matt, well done with that. One of the nice things, or one of the hardest things actually, is explaining these things clearly. And I think you've explained that fantastically there. And really nice as well that although we looked at it live, if I didn't get to it, wouldn't be the end of the world. Question 3 tonight, I think, is worth a bit of a chat. And if you are watching live, please pop an answer to Ethan's question in the chat. Do you take notes when you're programming? Now, I know a lot of people don't, and I know a lot of people just like to get stuck into programming, but it is a good question. And I am the sort of person that always has a paper notebook to hand because I do like to mode shift when I'm making notes. I like to put something physically down on paper because I like to remember whereabouts it is. And I find that if I'm writing notes electronically, sometimes that can be a bit ephemeral and just sort of disappear from my mind as to where it is. I like to be able to flick through something and go, there is the note. That could be because I'm old, but it also could just be a style of learning. We have 18 votes. Let's see what the results were overall. So half people say sometimes, a chunk of people say no, and a very small amount of people say yes. I suppose the bigger question is, do you take notes when you're just generally coding or when you're trying to learn something? And I think that's the big difference. If I flip back in my notebook to the last time I was trying to learn something, there we go. Last time I was trying to learn something, page full of notes of key things that I need to remember or key bits of codes that I wanted to use. Last time I was programming to build something, it's just ideas. It's just questions to myself and things like that that I would have written if it wasn't a to-do in the code. I think that's interesting because it says a lot about us as an industry, really, doesn't it? Do you take notes? Do you write comments? That's an equally fractious question, really. Ironclad, who works with us now, says he makes a markdown file and writes all his plans in there as well as drawing it out on paper. Ironclad is very well prepared, which is probably why he's so effective. Actually, that's fantastic. Oh, a Notion user. Ethan's a Notion user. That's interesting. What's Lena saying? Lena's saying a markdown file in the REPL. Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the things that you could do as well is you could put threads in there to yourself, couldn't you? You could put threads and you could put little notes to yourself. If you're wondering what I'm talking about there, you could just right click on a single line, start a thread, and write a note to yourself. And that just sort of lives in line there. So, I mean, that would be another nice way of making little notes and comments as well. And you can go and you can follow up or questions to yourself. You could write them in. Of course, the point of threads is that it's meant to be better used with multiple people working in the same REPL. It's not just for a one person interface, but it is there if you want to use it. So please do feel free. All these features are there. If you use them in an interesting way, let us know the interesting way you're using them because that's the best part of this job. So let's go back to the Discord for our next question tonight. And we are moving quite fast through this today, so I might just slow down a little bit. And I think this is really interesting because this is something this is something that we're about to get to with 100 days of code. So this user, which is give me your data, which is not at all suspect at all, is it? By the way, I really like the fact that I can say sus again. Thank you. What's that game? Was it Among Us? Thank you for bringing that back. I feel like that we haven't used that since the 80s very much. But yeah, that username is not suspect at all. It's not sus. But they say, I'm making a game in Python that completely communicates to the console, but I think it would be cleaner if it would come out of a website rather than a REPL. Yeah. And part of what we were doing in 100 days this week is looking at our first user interface. That is Takinta. And again, as I say, if anybody's ever used Takinta before, you'll know that is a bit like pulling teeth. It's hard work trying to build something graphical in that looks really good. Websites, web development is really where the action is because it's a lot easier to build nice and custom web UI that you can plug into a Python backend. In this case, a Flask. Flask is a web server that runs in Python. So you can use all your Python knowledge to expand upon that. And actually, the last 30 days of 100 days of code use Flask in some respect to generate better front ends that use graphical elements using the web. I started using Flask a couple of years ago, and I think it's really, really nice, and it's a nice way of putting your output. But I just sort of wanted to take a few minutes to show the difference between a standard REPL that would output in the console, and a Flask REPL. So here's our Python file. You'll know that because there's an infinite while loop in here, it is going to loop forever. But I have to click run, and it runs in the console. That's the only place we're getting any output. Let's make a Flask REPL and have a look at what the difference is when we make it. Then I'm going to use the absolute standard template here, but you'll see that one of the things that we get once it creates itself is we get some boilerplate code for the first time that is actually useful. And when I click run on that, it's not just the console that I'm getting now. In fact, what I'm getting is a web view as well. And that web view is being generated by my REPL. And this is quite powerful, and this is very different to any sort of development you might have done before. If you use the console-based output, giving output as a website is nicer, but has its own headaches. For instance, the way Flask defines its pages is through these app routes. Of course, the beauty of a REPL is straight away that is available on the internet. That's already been hosted. You go to that website address and get access to that page straight away. But I can look at it from my dev tools here if I want to. From that website address, the default page, the first page you'd go to, just typed it in /nothing, you'd end up here. And that's what that approot command does. It says, look, if you just go to /, just go to the website, I want you to run the next subroutine. That's that. So if I wanted to change what it was saying, I could change this here. Now you'll see there that just clicking refresh doesn't do a great deal. It's because I've changed some of the actual Python code. So I need to stop the server and restart it. That is one of the limitations and the frustrations in website development with something like Flask, but you get used to it. And now my page is serving a different thing. If I wanted to output to a different page, I could take that entire code, paste it in here. Let's call our page /hello. Well, let's call it goodbye because we've got a hello page. We'll say bye from Replit there. I need to change this because the subroutine names can't overlap. Stop it, run it again. And if I pull up my page here and I go /buy, it should load our buy page. Again, the way that's being loaded is very, very simple. The app route is being selected by the URL and it's running the subroutine immediately after it. One of the nice things, though, about building things with Flask is that things like Replit DB now become multiplayer in a bit more of a useful context. The way Replit DB works, of course, is you get a separate database per REPL. So if you fork it, it's a different database. And that's really nice because every user that runs it then gets their own database from it. And so you can make sure that your data is independent. But if you're building something like a game, you probably want things like moves or high score tables to be stored and shared amongst its users. Well, the thing about building a web server application in something like Flask is you would never give the REPL URL to share it out. You would give the actual website URL, so the repl.co domain. And of course, we can connect this if we want to a custom domain. So you can link it to a domain you've purchased elsewhere. And you can really go to town with this, which is great because if you are sharing your website address, one of the nice things that's happening on top of that then is that the REPL with the database is sharing multiple pages. So every user that goes to your website address can access the same REPL DB, which gives you a lot of flexibility in what you can actually then go and do with it. And in 100 Days of Code, we build things like chat applications, fake versions of Twitter, stuff like that that you couldn't do with a single REPL, which is a really nice thing that you'll be doing as you get up towards the higher day numbers. So Flask is a great technology. In fact, any web server is great technology, and there's loads of them to choose from. I personally am a massive fan of PHP, but I say this every fortnight. It's just me and Mark Zuckerberg that like PHP. Pick a more modern technology if you want to. I like PHP because you can develop in it without having to stop and restart the server. Just refreshing the page will cause the code to be running in from scratch, which is probably not the most efficient thing, but it means that you can prototype and develop very, very quickly in a language like PHP, especially as it's old and crufty and has about 20,000 ways of doing anything in particular. On with the next question. I'm trying to see the REPL history of the REPL submitted by students because they think some of the students have copied and code and pasted it. Yes, I'm sure none of us have ever copied code and pasted it in, especially professionally. um, we often joke that being a developer is just as much about being able to Google something as it is about understanding how programming works. So let's have a look at REPL history in a normal REPL, and then we'll have a look at it in Teams and see how it works. So let's hop back to our previous. Oh no, it goes back to our previous REPL, I think. Here we go. REPL history now is available in any of our REPLs directly in the workspace. You don't have to go to a special history button, which it used to be. There used to be a little history button at the top here. We could go and we could go back to it. Now it's embedded in everyone, and it's brilliant because to see what happened, you can just drag this slider back and you can see who's doing what and who's typing bit by bit. Now, here is how you tell if somebody copied or pasted or not. Because as you're moving through that, you'll notice that as I'm typing, you can see Replit records each individual keystroke. And that's really, really powerful. In fact, what it is a bit of an offshoot about how multiplayer works. So the same technology that powers multiplayer powers our ability to store this level of history, which is pretty cool. But watch what happens when we copy and paste in all that code from the previous question. So there it was being typed. Boom. The code comes in one big chunk because it was one keystroke to do. That's how you tell if a user's been copying and pasting code into their REPL. And it's the new in workspace view that you want to use. In fact, one of the nice things about it is you can actually play this back. And you can watch your code development. This seems to me like a perfect thing to turn into a GIF and stick on Twitter. Because if you spent hours and hours of your life coding something, then isn't it nice to show that progression? It's like those time lapses of drawing, but with code. I think that's pretty cool. I'd post that. And of course, the nice thing is you can click compare, so you can see the diffs between what you're looking at and the most recent version. So if you broke something in your code, and this is what it's particularly useful for, you can send it back until it was working again and see exactly what's different between this and the one before it. REPL history is brilliant, especially if you restore it, because restoring it doesn't destroy the history, and it'll tell you that. Restoring is non-destructive, so what it does is it adds putting it back to the previous point. So I can actually go straight back to the previous line of code, and I can see that entire history still there. It's a wonderful thing, history in Replit. Excuse me. And it does make a really big difference to the way in which you can use something like this. You've always got those history points that you can go back to. Now, of course, that's tracking all the files. So I can even go back in and look at things like files that have been automatically created there. Server authored, you see there. So no changes needed. Even your hidden files are being tracked. Even things like your image files are being tracked with that. So it's very, very easy to pull that data up. Let's go into a team. And let's see how that looks different if you are in a team 3DU. Let's have a look. we go. Here's one that I know that I've been working on. Oh, maybe not this one then. Let's go back and have a look. Also new to the workspace is a button that takes you back to the team. We lost it when we changed some of the settings. Right. I'm sure I've got one down here. Here's one. So once again, I am not in the right place. I'm not in the right place because where I am is in the teacher edit view, and this person's been talking about students' work. So let's go and look at some students' work. There is some submissions. Let's see what this chap has been doing. He looks like a dodgy fella. It's me. That's why. I've got my submission there. And again, the history button is just here. We can pull it up and we can push our way back to see where everything's going and see the progression. And you can see that this dodgy character did paste in a bunch of code as almost the second thing. That's really cool. That's how you go and see that history, and that's how you use it in production. Quick question from Paul. Can I delete Fluxbox entirely to replace it with i3? No, you can kill it, but it's annoying. Right. This is where I completely embarrass myself and say, I don't know the context of that entire question. I'm sorry, Paul. If you can give me a bit more detail about what you're talking about, we can have a look. That does seem like a question that I might need to pass to somebody else and come back to you with, though, because, as I say, I don't know what the context is, and I can't quite work it out from the question. More details, and I'll try and help. But as ever, no one person is the complete knowledge base of everything, unfortunately, but I will try to help if you can give me a bit more detail on that. Okay, another question from the 100 Days of Code. This is from day 25, and well, it was from day 25. One of the things I think is really interesting, and the reason I picked this question actually is because clearly the user is posting a question that's not from our 100 Days of Code, because they're on day 25 and less than 228. That's not how ours works. But thank you for coming along. But the question is interesting, and they have formatted it well, and the answer is almost blatantly staring us in the face here. And you could stare at this question for a while. If you don't know anything about pandas as a Python library for doing data science, you might think, oh, I really don't know what's going on there. Something unbelievable that I'm not sure about. But the problem is not in the library. The problem is not in the structure of the dictionary. The problem is here is something very, very simple. It is this here. This line here is where they're defining the list of numbers. And once again, it's a very similar problem to one we've seen before. They've put their list in quotes. That's not a list of numbers. That's a list with one string in it. I'm going to bring Paul's question up again. Thank you, Paul. I'm sorry if I'm not going to be very helpful with this tonight. The default window manager rep is Fluxbox. In the output tabs, you can interact with the desktop and stuff. So adding i3 as a Nix package, I should run it. Oh, yeah, I see. Yes. Yes, that to me sounds like I'm going to have to talk to someone in engineering about that, because I'm sure there's a specific reason why you can't. But if you don't like it, Paul, what happens if you do remove it from Nix? Oh no, it says there's one already running. So if you try and remove it from the .nix file, and by the way, what we're talking about, everyone, in terms of a .nix file, is if you are in a REPL, and I'll just go and grab one just for instance to demo it. Let me make one. Here we go. Some of the hidden files which you can access through this menu here include a replit.nix file, which contains the settings for how this REPL is built. And there's a load of cool things you can do with that. You can bring in different languages, different packages, different bits and bobs. You can make a completely custom REPL that does exactly what you want. Unfortunately, what Paul's talking about is a little bit, I say, above my pay grade. It's stuff I haven't done before. And I spoke. Look, the thing is that it all runs on Nix. So theoretically, you should be able to do what you want. So try, see what happens. That's one of those questions, Paul, that I'm going to pose to the engineering team, though. So I'll make a quick note of that. And if you can pop, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to pop my email address up on the screen for you, Paul. If you want to drop me an email just to remind me of that question, I'll ask some people in engineering that are a bit more knowledgeable about the setup than me, and I can get you a concrete answer. And then I'll know as well. So next time somebody asks me about Fluxbox, I don't have to sound like a complete moron when I just look confused. Thank you for your question, though, and I'll try my very best to answer it. But drop me an email and I'll see what I can do. Okay. This replit.nix file, by the way, is really, really interesting because Nix packages basically mean you can very, very quickly install what you want. And there is a question tonight that I wanted to get to, which dealt with this. So let me have a quick look to see if I can find that question. Let's have a look. Here it is. Well, that's quite handy. This question here, which we can't really see very well because this image is from mobile and quite difficult to see. But if I can zoom, here we go. Here we go. I think this is going to be very difficult to see on the live stream. Unfortunately, our upload only happens at 720. So apologies that if this highly compressed red on dark JPEG is difficult to see on a 720p live stream. But this is an error that this user got, and the question is, I don't know what's going on. Now, if you ever see an error on Replit that involves the word Nix somewhere, that's probably due to the back end, the package is not working, the package is mismatching. In this case, the error is the package that they're trying to install is only compatible with Python, with a Python version higher than the REPL they're currently in. Now, that's reasonably easy to fix, actually. And one of our users comes in to the chat underneath and tries to explain that. There's been no follow-up since, so I don't know if they've managed to actually fix that themselves, but let's have a look and see if we can do that. So randbytes, which I'll just take a copy of, was introduced in Python 3.9, and we're running 3.8. So let's take that. This is our default. This is the JavaScript one. So let's make a Python REPL. And let's have a look what version we're running. And let's try and import that package and just see what error messages we get. Okay, so let's go for import randbytes. Okay, no module found. Let's see if we can install it with the package manager. That doesn't look like the one to me. Okay. Let's have a look at the original code. Let's see what was. Unfortunately, didn't supply the code. Let's have a look though at what version of Python we're looking at, because the way we do that is we show the hidden files and we go and have a look at replit.nix. And you'll see here straight away in our packages, Python 3.8. That's 3.8. There's a website actually that shows you all the Nix packages and things like that you can use and you can import. And there are more modern versions of Python available if you'd like. In fact, I think some of our community members have even created, let's have a look. I think some of our community members have created, yeah, here we go. Coding Cactus has given us a 3.10, 3.10, isn't it? I'll stop saying that. A 3.10 version of Python there, built from Nix if you want it. But let's assume that we want to go up to 3.9. Well, we can increment that number. I'm just going to adjust everywhere I see 3.8. I think that's it. And I'm going to click run. So everything looks good there. And I can kill this if I want to and restart the REPL, and I should get that new version of Python running the next time I'm going. In fact, if we had some code that's actually using elements of Python 3.9, that would be useful. Now, where this comes in very handy is in one of the most recent versions of Python, they've introduced a new syntax. It's essentially a switch case syntax that you might be familiar with from other programming languages. So instead of having a bunch of ifs and elifs, it allows you to define a variable to watch and then to tell it what to do given different values of that variable. It's a very old construct. I think it might even be in C, as far back as that. But certainly it is a common construct in lots of languages. Python didn't have it, never had it at all until recently. And I think it was 3.10, maybe 3.11, where the switch case construct was added. I can't remember that at the top of my head because it's pretty much brand new in the world of Python. But if you wanted to use that, you would have to manually increase that version of Python or use one of the templates. It is very easy to do, though. It is literally getting into that replit.nix file, changing some values, and going from there. In fact, it's so easy to do that you can even create a blank REPL. And a blank REPL is a REPL where the replit.nix file just has a placeholder bit of information in it. It's a placeholder bit of information because that's what it does when you click run, which I love. But if you're trying to build a custom setup of something, and this is something I've used when I was combining PHP and MySQL together, so I could make a REPL template for myself that had both those things set up and configured and running successfully. You can actually create a blank REPL and then go and pull in your Nix packages, put all your settings together, and turn that into a template for yourself if you'd like. It's a really powerful thing, actually. And it's one of the reasons that Replit is so good at supporting so many languages, because you essentially have infinity languages at your disposal simply by using Nix packages. I feel like we're really smashing the Discord questions today. I'm quite pleased with that. We answered this one, didn't we? Yes. So there we go. This one was having the, again, it's a quotation problem. It's surprising how often a problem in code boils down to just doing something like that. And even as a person that taught programming in schools for 20 years, I do this occasionally. Just while I was showing something on the board and look like a muppet. It happens. You lapse concentration for a few seconds, and that can happen. This is why things like pair programming are so powerful, because having two people working on one piece of code can spot small errors like this as they're being typed and correct them as you go. If you've never done pair programming before, it's well worth a go. Multiplayer on Replit makes it very, very easy. And the idea of pair programming is you have one navigator, so somebody just watching the code and talking about it and saying what we should do next, and one driver, somebody actually typing the code. And you swap, you take turns doing that so that nobody gets tired of doing one thing. But with two pairs of eyes on the code, you pick up a lot of those silly errors that you'd otherwise fall into. And that makes a big difference to how productive you can actually be. This is an interesting question. Trying to make a text detector in Python. Now, Ethan tried to get a follow-up to that, but Cloud Zeno didn't give us any more information. But I've heard this question multiple times before, and sometimes what it means is if I take input, is that text? Is that a string versus is it a number? And there are some functions in Python that allow you to do that. So let's make a new Python REPL, and let's have a look at how we might be able to do that. I'm not going to take input. I'm just going to make a string here called my string and say, is this text? Now, one of the things we could try is we could simply try printing out values like my string dot is text. I think it's all lowercase actually. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it is a capital T. Maybe it's is string. Let's double check, shall we? We've got is int, we've got is bool, things like that. Python is string. Let's have a look. What was that one? And we can do it as instance. Yeah, I know that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay, well, I can't see an obvious answer for that. But one of the things you could do is we can do for letter in my string. And we can, oh, is alpha? This is the problem. You know, so many programming languages, and eventually all the things start blurring together in your head. Have a quick look. What I'm doing on my other screen is just doing a bit of quick Googling to check that. Oh, there is an is alpha method. There we go. So what we can do is we can just print out. I'm going to do an F string here. Says he's going to do an F string. Puts the wrong symbol in. What a map it. Right. We'll say letter is, then in here, I'm going to do letter is alpha. I'll run that. And what that will do is for each letter, it's going to tell us if it's a letter or not. Now, there is an issue with that. And if you look at the output on the screen at the moment, hopefully you can see what that is that spaces, as far as it's concerned, are not letters. Okay, you might say, we'll ignore spaces. Yeah, well, what about the question mark at the end? Technically, not a letter, but would be considered text. What you find very quickly is that just saying something like, can I tell if something's text or not, is a more difficult question than just bringing in a single command. An easier thing would be to say, are any of these numbers? Because that is a slightly easier question. And I believe the function is int. Maybe it is integer. Maybe it is num. Let's have a look. The live stream where David just clicks buttons and wonders what it is. Do you know what? I'm just going to look it up. Python is integer. Let's have a look. It's going to be something really simple now. I know it is. Is underscore integer? Maybe. Let's have a look. No, maybe not. There is the thing is, the proper way of doing this is using instance. I don't really want to do that when I'm demoing this to you today because it's a bit more complicated than we say there. Do you know what? I'm going to leave that for a minute. We'll go back to is alpha because it's easier to explain. One of the easier ways to do it would be just to go through and check to see if everything was a number. Because if you consider that words, sentences, text is anything but numbers, then you're just looking for numbers. Even then, though, a sentence could theoretically contain a number and still be a sentence. It is quite difficult to answer that question. How do you make a text detector? If that's what we're saying. The other option is exactly what Mario is thinking here is, do you mean OCR? Do you mean optical character recognition? You take in an image and you identify and pick out the text. Well, yes, and there's a bunch of tutorials for that. Replit's really good as a testing ground to build versions and programs like that as well. So here is a very wide open generic question, and there are a lot of points to it where you have to go, we just need more information. If you are using ask.replit.com or the Discord, don't be frightened about asking a question, but also please, 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 please give us more information. If somebody tries to help you and says, I don't really know what you mean, can we have more? And Ethan here has asked, like, you're trying to decode binary, you're trying to elaborate on what's going on. Don't be afraid to come back and give more detail. The points of these forums, the points of this very web series, and the point of the Discord of the code questions is, if you don't know something, you ask somebody. And we might not be able to answer your questions on the first go. In fact, poor Paul there asked a question that I genuinely did not know the answer to. It was a little bit technical in an area that I'm not experienced with. But the beauty of a community and the point of the Replit community is that if I don't know the answer, somebody else in the community might, or a group of us together might be able to work out the answer. It's the power of a community, everyone. It's the reason I love the Replit community so much, that everyone is extremely knowledgeable and always willing to help. So please don't feel embarrassed about asking a question and then being asked for clarification or follow-ups. That's just so we can make a better stab at helping you. Okay. Uh, Before we go tonight, because we've got about 4 minutes to go, I did just want to point to this one: how to use environment variables when making a Discord bot. Discord bots, by the way, great. I'd love to make a tutorial series on how to make Discord bots and do some cool stuff with them. If you're watching this and you've got ideas for what you'd like a Discord bot to do, what you'd like to learn how to make a Discord bot do something other than just the simple things of respond to certain questions and try and get clarification, those sorts of things, or put music in, or memes, all the standard things. If you've got an idea for what you'd like to learn about something to do with the Discord bot, let me know, because that's my next plan, is to have a think about how we might use our tutorial function to help with things like Discord bots, which are quite a common use case. But this question is interesting, because it's asking about using environment variables. Now, environment variables are something that we're looking at in 100 days of code, particularly secrets, and actually that will be released this week. We look at environmental variables and secrets on day 70. That should be, fingers crossed, released on Friday. Remember, Friday is our day for releasing content for 100 days of code. So this is quite a timely question, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have a look at it. In fact, in Replit, all the environmental variables are very, very easy to bring in. You don't even need to really remember anything, because all you really need to do, where is my Replit window gone? Here we go. All you really need to do is bring up the new sidebar, scroll down and look for secrets. And I'm actually going to bring that over here. There we go. So I can set the key and the value of my secret. Remember, these work a little bit like dictionaries. Dictionaries in Python or other languages have a key name and a key value. So I can set something like my password is a baldy one, because of course it would be if I can spell. And if I add that, that's stored as a variable in my environment. That's not stored as actual code in my REPL. One of the nice things about secrets is that if I fork this REPL, I don't get the secrets. If I look at the code of this REPL, I can't see the secrets. If I run this REPL, it'll work, but I can't see what those secrets are. And as ever with Replit, there are some nice, easy ways to bring that stuff in. I don't need to remember a bunch of stuff, because I add the imports. I can bring in the secret without having to remember a bunch of code. This is one of my favorite things in Replit: the ability to store environmental variables and secrets, things that you wouldn't want going at your source code, in a slightly different place in an easy to access manner, and not even having to remember all the code in all the different programming languages to access those environmental variables. To me, that is absolute magic. And it's one of the things I love about Replit. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today. Not a lot of interaction in the chat today, which is a little bit disappointing. Don't forget, do tell your friends, do tell people that have got coding questions to rock up to this, because the point of this is to try and answer your questions. Remember, we give priority to our live viewers always. So if you do have questions, you can put them in the forums, you can put them in the Discord, or you can wait and pop them in the live chat for this, always linked from the Community Hub. Don't forget, the Community Hub tells you what events and things are going this week. This week, on Saturday, we have the results of the tutorial jam, and we're having a lot of fun judging those. We'll have some great tutorials to show you on Saturday. Have a look at the Community Hub for more details on that. And don't forget to tune in live to see who the winners were and who won those amazing prizes. For now, though, I've been David Morgan. I will see you again on Friday if you're doing the 100 Days of Code for the next few days, where we're doing the fun of Takinta and the excitement of secrets and environmental variables. A good bunch of stuff to do this week. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.